Well, this is working. Oh, they're right there. Okay. Okay.
dai dai da da, dai dai da dai 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 da da, dai dai da dai 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 da da, dai dai da dai 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 da. Yay, die, 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 yay, die, die, yay, die, yay, die, 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 yay, die, 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 yay, שלא ייגמר לעולם החול והים רשרוש של המים ברק השמיים תפילת האדם הכל וחיים רשרוש של המים ברק השמיים תפילת האדם. Oh God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
Feels like we were just here, and that's because we were just here. And this group of beloveds gathered just a few weeks ago to part company with Ed Hirschberg. And the story of this moment feels very spiritual to me and has from the beginning. We spoke of the love between Faye and Ed, and we spoke of their devotion. The moment Faye heard about Ed, her body reacted, her soul chased after him, and she caught up. And this is the story that feels like the one of what's happened over the past few weeks, that life without one another really wasn't going to be possible. So Faye figured out a way to make this work. And so we gather here. This happens sometimes. It happens sometimes in the weird world of mortality and love, where we just don't fully understand the timing or possibility of it all. Yet here we stand in this moment. Some might argue that this was a very typical Faye maneuver, that this was going to be how she needed it to be. And I say, so be it. Death has taken our beloved Faye Hirschberg. And so we gather here in lamentation and loneliness, a bit of sorrow and longing. We invite the presence of the divine to join us here as she makes her way forward. For Faye's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a remembrance. For all these and more, we offer gratitude to the Creator of all things and everyone. As we gather here, we invite the voice of our sacred scriptures, and that voice brings us the message of the Holy One. It tells us of our connection with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. There's the temptation in this moment to try not to make it just exactly the same thing, just not exactly the same thing we just did. And so I invite you all to call to memory the uniqueness of your time with Faye. And when you find yourself leaning toward the fact that this is just the same thing that we just did, just know that I do think there's a narrative in which this is how it had to be. This is how they needed it to be. And we support that with our presence and our love. The words of the 23rd Psalm. Not yet.
Adonai rohi lo exal. Hino deshet yarmitzeni al mei menuchot yenachaleini. Nafshi yishovei Yancheini b'magalei tzedek. Yancheini b'magalei tzedek. Leman shemo. Kam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai, lefanai, shulchan neged sorerai. Dishanta v'Hashem roshi, kosi ravaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai. Kol yemei chayai. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. You lead me in the right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
Only being here for a short time, of course, my encounters with Faye were limited, but I did feel always a kindred spirit in candor. I tend to enjoy people of candor, honesty, straight talk. Sharing with Barry and Shelley that, and I think Ethan and Peyton, I'm not sure if you were here for this conversation, but visiting with Faye many months ago at her bedside, we had a really lovely conversation about everything and anything, life and history, love and relationship. And as the sun set on the day, the sky turned electric, oranges and bright lavenders and magenta, you know how it does. And right out the window, I said, Faye, you got to see this sunset. Look at that sunset. To which she replied, I don't really get into that kind of thing. Which is hard, really, when you think about it. But either she wasn't in the mood or it wasn't her jam. And why should she have to fake it? This moment of parting company with Faye Hirschberg is to part company with someone whose talk was straight and real. Even if it had a jagged edge or two, you always knew what she was thinking and feeling. And this moment, as we bury her, we integrate the gifts of her soul in our own lives and recognize with great awareness that for everything there is a season. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a time for every experience under heaven, even a sunset or two. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time for the sun to rise and a time for the sun to set. And so this moment, we will be offered a few words of more intimate memory and connection, as Barry has a few things to say about his mom.
Feels like I've been here before. As
Shelley can attest, I don't really like holidays. Most holidays I don't like. I do like Groundhog's Day. And it does feel like Groundhog's Day here. It's 1 month ago today that my dad passed away. I did. Also, thank you for being here and people on Zoom. We appreciate you being with us on Zoom. We know that COVID makes it very difficult to be in person, as well as length of miles, and we appreciate you. When thinking about my mom, I wrote earlier, my mom had no filter. She said what she wanted. She lived how she wanted. If you weren't okay with that, then she would say tough luck. You either loved or hated her for that. There's very little in between. Most people loved her tremendously, even though she could be quite difficult at times. She most definitely had a very unique personality. Dates and celebrations were very important to her. My birthday is coming up in a week on the 19th. When my mom went into labor, the doctor said there was no way this kid was coming out today. Well, February 20th was my mom's sister's yahrzeit, and she definitely did not want to be celebrating a birthday and observing a yahrzeit on the same day. My mom, who swore very infrequently, said, like hell, he's coming out tomorrow. I was born at 10:56 p.m. that night. She was very upset that she had to be in the hospital a few years ago over New Year's Eve. Most people would say, oh, well, we'll do it next year. Not her. As Lonnie and Christy can attest. The following February, the six of us, Shelley, my parents, Lonnie, Christy, went out to a nice New Year's dinner. I even bought New Year's hats, confetti, noisemakers to celebrate. I think everybody at the restaurant thought that we were nuts. And if a birthday, a Valentine's, an anniversary, a Halloween card, you name it, if it wasn't delivered to her on time, you'd be on her list. Unfortunately, she was so obsessed with this that sometimes she even terminated friendships over this. We disagreed on many issues. My mom and dad grew up in a different era when racism, LGBTQ issues, social issues were not acceptable today. Were not acceptable today, and it was just not the norm. I tried many times to sway her to be a more accepting person, more accepting line of thought. She would say that I was pushing her buttons and trying to upset her. That really wasn't true, although I did push her buttons on other issues. I ended up giving up on that one. Sometimes things are just too ingrained in someone to be changed. She had a huge issue with age. She never, ever would admit that she was old. She used to drive senior citizens to various appointments. She either didn't know or refused to believe that she was at least 10 years older than each of them. Her main issue with not wanting to move to La Costa Glen was because only old people lived there. For a long time, she refused to use a walker when really past when she needed one because only old people use them. When talking about my parents, I referred to them as my parental unit. They were always together, never apart. This is from my dad's book, but it does certainly reflect the thoughts that they had on each other. Sorry, I lost the page. This is when they were both starting my dad's business together, which was really theirs. For 2 years, we really toughed it out. Neither Faye or I had jobs. We lived on $11 a week. We had to be very creative during this time. Luckily, Faye enjoyed cooking, and she was very choosy when buying foods. She was her own innovative food shopper, name of this company. In Faye, I had a real partner. I would tell her, I am so lucky to be married to you. I opened the door to a smiling wife and a hot meal. I cannot tell you what it meant to have that complete partnership behind me. We've been married now for 66 years. This was written about 4 years ago. And in everything, we have always worked together. My parents were very loud. It could have been because they just couldn't hear sometimes, or it could have been they just weren't aware of their surroundings. But she really didn't care. It's how she was. Dr. Bruce Sachs was their doctor, and as I said, they do everything together. They both had appointments together. And one time after they had their appointments, my dad said to Bruce, can I talk to you in private, please? Bruce said, sure. So they went back into the office, and my dad explained that he was having some issues at night with the bed, going to bed. And Bruce said, no problem. We can take care of that. We've got pull-ups. Not a big deal. So he came out, and my mom said, what were you doing back there? And my dad said, well, I was talking about manly things. He said, what? Tell me, what were you doing? He said, it's private. And she said, what? And very loudly with everybody else in the office. What? Did you tell him that you were wetting the bed? And he said, well, yes, I did. She said, I do that all the time too. No problem. I wasn't in the office, but I could just see the faces of people that were. She also had a heavy guilty complex about her not providing opportunities for me to do this or that. When Ethan would be doing karate, she said, oh, I didn't give you the opportunity to take karate when you were young. That's okay. When a friend of ours was doing well in tennis, oh, I didn't give you the opportunity to play tennis. She felt guilty about that, which was I don't know, typical would be the word, but it was a large part of her persona. She was always worried and anxious. I'd call her. The first thing she would say is, what's wrong? She said quite often, I've always loved you, but you didn't think I did because Dad and I traveled so much when you were young. Well, I know she loved me, but the truth is I was perfectly fine with them traveling. I got to hang out with my babysitters, and I loved that. So it certainly was not an issue for me when I was growing up, but it was very difficult to convince her of that. She also loved Shelley and Ethan and Peyton tremendously. She loved being a mother-in-law and grandmother, and cherished the many visits they had with us when they would drive down from San Francisco. Even in the late 80s, they chose to drive, not because they were afraid of planes. They just liked to stop at Harris Ranch for lunch on the way. Of course, she also loved being closer to all of us when they moved to Carlsbad 5 years ago. She really loved many of you from Hopper Rob that are here today. Simply put, you welcome both of them as family. Thank you. The continuous worrying and anxiety was one of the factors that caused her to always have high blood pressure. Whenever at the doctor's office or in the hospital, the staff would be complaining about her high blood pressure. She would say, I don't get strokes, I give strokes, which was pretty true until my dad passed. She had 9+ lives. She refused to die. She had cancer 3 years ago, and after a half of a round of chemo, she completely tanked out. I'm sure a number of people probably remember that. She rarely ate, she was completely bedridden, and we thought this would be the end. 12 days later, she started to come back to life, eventually went back to independent living with my dad. A year and a half ago, she had a large intestine operation at 92, something that generally isn't done. She was very vain. She did not want to have a colostomy bag. She refused that. The doctors agreed, okay, we'll do that, but it is extremely dangerous. She survived the operation, but after 2 weeks in the hospital, the operation site started to come apart. All the doctors said that there was no way to fix this without removing her entire intestine, which she refused. They gave her about 5 days to live. Again, this was a year and a half ago. Even this time, when I was at the hospital with her, the night of my dad's death, when she had the stroke, she said, "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me." COVID didn't directly cause their deaths, but it took away from me and my family the ability to be with my parents during their last days. I don't want to get too political, but I will never forgive the elected leaders and their neighbors who denied and downplayed the magnitude of this virus. They've been a disgrace to our country. And I hope and pray that we can change the political climate towards a more accepting culture. There are many people who have not been able to personally comfort the sick and or dying because of these necessary safety protocols. I believe if we had more competent leadership, we may have had a better handle on COVID, and I would have been able to be at my parents' sides while they were sick. Right before I started in college at UCLA, a parent orientation was offered. The parents were housed in the dorms, and my parents were upset that the single beds were attached to the walls and they could not be pushed together. I was in a room next door, and late at night, I had to get something out of their room. When I walked in, they were both in their separate beds, but holding hands across the room. Today is the 1-month anniversary of my dad's death. My mom and dad would have been married 70 years this April. She lived for him as much as he lived for her. My parental unit did absolutely everything together. I do find a sense of poetry in that my mom could not stand to be without my dad. And now, after an excruciating 4 weeks, they're holding hands together again. I love you, Mom. I'll miss you.
Violet wrote, "The eye never has its fill of seeing. Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of the world, never complete their task, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. We might yearn to have them close to us for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another moment together. But this is not to be. And as we've said, who knows how their will affected this. I make a faith choice that it's very much at play. We ask the Holy One be now with us here who grieve, because whenever parting comes, it seems to come too soon. Console us at this hour. Be near to us when light seems distant. Sustain us, O God, as we heal. So much of Jewish tradition asks us to embrace the comforting of the bereaved and the honoring of the deceased at the same time. Some rituals overlap and do that really well. We honor those who've died as we gather and speak loving words about them, call to our presence the voice of our tradition through chanting and prayer. And some rituals honor the deceased and they don't necessarily comfort the mourner. And some comfort the mourner and don't necessarily honor the deceased. This particular day feels like it's for Faye and Ed. And we are here for Barry and Shelley and Ethan and Peyton. This moment, I can't get over how much we are speaking of what they needed and what they wanted, and how we have to choose to honor that, even if it's against our will or wishes. Of course, it's hard to ask for more than 90 something years from people. Hard to ask people to be married for more than 70 years, but this imagery of them holding hands, even across a darkened dorm room from two rickety twin beds, invites us to imagine this now. And it both honors them and comforts us. Birth is a beginning and death a destination for all of us. Life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again so many times, Faye. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage. Sacred pilgrimage. A sacred pilgrimage indeed. Today we honor that sacred pilgrimage of Faye Hirschberg. Her way, her terms, her words, her approach, her outlook, and our ability to find love in that presence just for the realness that it offered. As we say farewell to Faye today, her physical presence, we imbue our lives with some of the spice and sweetness that she brought in her way. Her leaving this physical world invites us to carry a bit of her legacy forward. I will struggle to have more candor than I have, but every time I do, I will think of her. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. Into your care, we entrust the spirit of Faye Hirschberg. Sustain us all that we may meet with serenity the mysteries that lie ahead, knowing that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you, Holy One, are with us, the light of our lives, our hope in eternity. May the memory of Faye Hirschberg endure among us as a blessing. In life and in death, we cannot go where you are not, and where you are, hope endures. Sustained by this assurance, we summon the presence of the Holy One to this burial, and we share in the words of El Malay Rachamim for the safe passage of her soul. Please rise if you're able.
El Malay Rachamim Shochen Bamromi Amsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Keroshim Utehorim Kezohar Rakia Mazhiri Et nishmata shel alcha leolama bol harachamim Yastirei beseter grafav leolamim Bitror hachaim et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava V'nomar Amen. At the bottom of the page with the Star of David. Together. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament into the soul of Faye Hirschberg, who is gone into eternity. God have mercy, bring her under the cover of thy wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou her possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen.
We remain standing as we prepare for the lowering of the casket. This moment, of course, brings us into a stark reality of what this means. The dust returns to the earth as it was. The spirit returns to the divine presence, the reservoir of the holy. It is only the house of the spirit which we now lay within the earth. Spirit itself cannot die. Receive in mercy, O God, the soul of Faye Hirschberg. Grant her everlasting peace. Though no human eye has seen it, nor ear heard, nor mind has grasped it, still it is our inheritance. God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which loss inflicts is the measure of a love stronger than death. Though we cry in the anguish of our hearts, may we be like children who know that their parent is near. In this spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us to your keeping. As the vessel that contained the soul of Faye Hirschberg prepares to meet the earth, we'll share in the words of the mourner's cottage, which you can find in your blue handout. But before we do, a moment of silent recognition for the uniqueness of her soul, all the dimensions, the things that made us laugh, the things that caused us pain, the things that allowed us to enjoy her one-of-a-kind spirit. We call to mind the sound of her voice, the feel of her hand, the stories she told and the stories that were told to her. A moment of silent memory. We share in the words of the mourner's cottage together. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon, b'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam l'mei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. Yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudesha barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. May the Holy One grant peace to those who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us, as we say, Amen. Prepare for the ritual, Chesed Shalamet, shoveling of the earth. Barry and Shelley, Peyton and Ethan have asked that we step tenderly. Ed's grave is barely covered, so fresh it still feels. So they prefer if we can shovel by taking the earth around and maybe this way and not stepping on Ed's grave. It just doesn't feel right. Of course, we're in the cemetery and we understand that's where we stand, but I think Barry's words that it just feels so fresh. That's the sensitivity. So we'll invite Barry and Shelley and Peyton and Ethan to come first, and then you all are warmly invited to share in a blessing of release as we shovel the earth. Circle experience, and I love the idea that we would just all stand around both of them. So if everybody can go back to sort of, I love that circle moment. And I think we're gonna close with, Jerry just shared that Ailey was Faye's favorite, and you know, he played it on the flute at his bar mitzvah for her. So I think if we can all, if we can make our way around and just sort of come, you know, as best as social distancing allows, which we've already working on entirely. But and just come close, guys, come close. And I think we'll just sing her this lullaby, and we'll get ready to really embrace each other in this moment, this family that has embraced them and been embraced by them. And recognize that this is the farewell to both of them in so many ways. And that this spot will be a holy place where they can be encircled by you, remembered by you. And that's forever.
Eli, Eli, Shelo Yigamer Le'olam. Eli, Eli, Shelo Yigamer Le'olam. Hachol v'hayam, Hachol v'hayam. Reishrush shel hamayim, Reishrush shel hamayim. Berak hashamayim, Berak hashamayim. Tefilat ha'adam, Tefilat ha'adam. Hachol v'hayam, Hachol v'hayam. Rishrush hamayim, Rishrush shel hamayim. Berak hashamayim. Tefilat, Tefilat ha'adam. Oh God, my God. Oh God, my God. I pray that these things never end. I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the rush of the water, the crash of the heavens, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, prayer of the heart.
The conclusion of this experience asks us, Lech Ishilachcha Adonai. Can you walk forward? Go on your way. Keep walking. Lech Adonai Imach. Go on your way. And may God be with you. Halach lefanecha tzidkecha kavod Adonai especha. May your righteousness and everything that is unique and beautiful about you go with you. And may you receive beauty and glory of the Holy One along your path. May it be that the legacies of these Hirschbergs live and burn brightly in the legacies of these Hirschbergs and all of you in connection and in the web of the community you have woven and the family you have built. May it be a blessing. Thank you all so much for being here. The sun came out shine on this moment. You guys take your time. Everybody take your time.